Good morning, YouTube. Thought I'll go live today. I just want to talk about some videos that I have planned. Um, I'm going to be doing some videos looking at just the comparatives between Vajrayana Buddhism and some of the first and second century schools um, of the Kabbalah within Jewish mysticism and the Merkava mysticism, according to the Hekilot literature, which deals with the palaces, the heavenly abodes, which are basically metaphors for altered states of consciousness. And today I just want to talk specifically um, just about the universality and the power of mantra as practiced within the modality of Kabbalah. And many might find it interesting that mantras are a tool and part of the meditative tradition of Jewish mysticism, but meditative tradition and especially mantras have always been a big part in Jewish mysticism and its practice throughout the thousands of years that it's developed in the different schools. And most people are familiar with mantras and that word mantra because of the Hindu tradition, the Vedas. Mantra is a Sanskrit word, and basically it just denotes words that were believed to be words of power, and not even necessarily words that make sense or can be translated. Some of them have no meaning. And really what's the power behind the mantras isn't the words themselves, but the vibrations that these sounds, that these words convey and create. And these vibrations have the power to alter consciousness and alter our states of consciousness. So I just wanted to come on here live just real quick and to just briefly just kind of tell you guys what I'm going to be up to and what I've been doing. And at this point in my life, my major form of practice is within Tibetan Buddhism, within the Kagyu lineage, especially within the Karma Kagyu and Drikung Kagyu lineages of Vajrayana. Vajrayana is just another word for Tibetan Buddhism or Tantric Buddhism. Vajrayana is believed to be the third turning of the wheel of Buddha's teachings. He first came and taught Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism, which is the way it should be referenced rather than Hinayana. But it's the way of the elders is Theravada Buddhism, and it really focuses on the sutras. Then the second turning of the wheel, Lord Buddha, he taught us Mahayana, Mahayana Buddhism, which focuses on the Bodhisattva path. Bodhisattva is an advanced, elevated being, an enlightened being who has made a vow and a commitment to not leave samsara until all have achieved and reached enlightenment. And so the goal of Mahayana Buddhism is selflessness and bodhicitta, and to really benefit all beings in everything that we say, do, and think. Then the third wheel was Vajrayana, the third turning of the Buddha's teachings, and it's the more esoteric form of Buddhism that deals with the tantras, deals with working with the subtle energies in a very powerful and transformative way, transforming the negative energies of hatred, arrogance, lust, anger, slothfulness, all these things, transforming those energies into positive energies, altruism, loving kindness, compassion, diligence, discipline, all these things. And so the idea is that energies, we can't destroy energy, we cannot get rid of energies, we can only transform energy. Energy will always exist, and it just moves from one form into another form. And so through breath control, through breathing, through meditation, through visualizations, through mantra, through sadhana practice, we work on transforming these energies for the benefit of all beings. And really to work on our own minds, which is the goal, to realize bliss and emptiness and the unity between the two. In the Heart Sutras, we come to realize that emptiness is form and form is emptiness. And one of the main ways that we come to realize this is through the meditative practice and tool of mantra. Within Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, there's many mantras, so many mantras, and each mantra specifically works with a certain energy. And I've come to realize how powerful mantras are. Now, with that said, mantras are found universally in almost every spiritual tradition. They might not be called mantras or might not use that term, but that technique and that modality of meditative practice you will find in almost every tradition, whether it's through chanting ikaros. Rabbi Ari Kaplan, whose books we're going to take a look at in the next few weeks, in the Hebrew tradition, there isn't any word that's similar, and so he just uses the word mantra. He uses a Sanskrit word, but the practice of mantra goes way back within Jewish mysticism, all the way back into the time of Babylon, if not before, back into the days of the schools of the prophets, where Jewish mystics, Israeli mystics, would go to these schools and learn techniques of ecstasy to reach altered states of consciousness. And it's a trip, but it's all there, and you can find references to these schools of the prophets in the Torah and in the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, and you'll definitely find references within the Talmud. And then come in the 1st, 2nd century, with books like the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation, which has been attributed to, supposedly this knowledge was given to Adam, the first man, and then to Avraham Avinu, Abraham, and then passed on through the patriarchs, all the way through, to the masters of the mystical arts within the Jewish tradition, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd centuries. This book is a very powerful book. I got this book probably when I was 17 years old. I've been reading it, studying it, probably for about 20 years now. And it's a very powerful book, very mysterious book, very hard to understand, some of the deeper points. Very mystical. This book is filled with charts and graphs, sigils, magic tables. Very profound. Very, very, very profound book. But it's definitely part of the practical and meditative traditions of the Kabbalah. And Ari Kaplan, he writes a beautiful translation and commentary on it. I highly recommend it if you get the chance to read it. Another book is the Bahir. This is another very profound book written in the 1st century. It's attributed to Rabbi Nechunia ben Hakana, who was a master of the 1st century esoteric school, Kabbalistic school. And again, it's beautifully translated by Rabbi Ari Kaplan, and he writes a beautiful commentary on it. Rabbi Ari Kaplan has several books on Jewish meditation and meditation in the Kabbalah, where he goes in depth into the different schools and different traditions within Jewish mysticism and their meditative techniques. And one thing that I found very interesting was just all the research he did, and how huge the technique and tool of mantra was utilized by the Jewish mystics. Rabbi Ari Kaplan, this is kind of what he has to say about meditation, and it's very much a universal way. The words are a little bit different, but there's definitely, you can see the perennial philosophy that runs through all of these world traditions and all these mystical traditions. And all the mystics, for the most part, all came to a very non-dual conclusion of reality, And yeah, I just find it so interesting. But Rabbi Ari Kaplan, he says in his book, Meditation and the Kabbalah, he says, meditation is primarily a means of attaining spiritual liberation. Its various methods are designated to loosen the bond of the physical, allowing the individual to ascend to the transcendental spiritual realm. One who accomplishes this successfully is said to have attained Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, which is the general Hebraic term for enlightenment. So it's very interesting, some of you might have heard that word before if you have been raised in, Christianity or Messianic Judaism or whatever, the Ruach HaKodesh. And in Christianity and Christianity's replacement theology, they transformed this concept of Ruach HaKodesh, which was in the Hebrew tradition, which translates correctly into like divine wind or the divine breath. And they turned this Ruach HaKodesh, which they translated Holy Spirit, which can also is, you can translate it as Holy Spirit. They transformed this into an entity, into a being, into a personality, part of the triune, the Trinitarian God of Christianity, the third person, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Within Judaism, it was never personality, it was never a person, it was never another being or entity. It was the divine force, the force that would come upon a prophet, that would come upon a sage, a holy person, according to the altruism, in a sense you can call that the bodhicitta that they developed. And as they would develop bodhicitta, the more, as they would follow the Torah and the mitzvot, the more they would become influenced by this Ruach HaKodesh. This divine breath, divine wind would come upon them, and they would enter into a mystical state, an altered state of consciousness. In Vajrayana, we accomplish this through many practices, through our sadhana practice, through meditative practices, through mantra, through ritual. And what's amazing is it's so similar to the sages of Israel. The same thing, ritual was involved. The ashes of the red heifer were involved. A form of sacrifice was involved. Chanting mantras were involved. Protection circles were involved, which is what a mandala is, magic circles, magic words. Theurgy, ritual practice, ritual magic. These are all found in all the world traditions, even within Christianity, though they won't say it's magic and they won't say it's ritual and they won't say it's theurgy, but it really is. Whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant, you practice theurgy, you practice ritual in some fashion and form. Anyway, these elements are found in all the mystical traditions, and mantras used. There's power in the word, there's power in the vibration that comes from these words that have found themselves to become words of power in these different mystical traditions. And they're words of power because it's believed that these words affect change in the environment, affect change in this reality, and can affect change in one's mind. Power of mantras, Ari Kaplan, he goes on to say even more, and this is again within the Jewish tradition. But he says this, he says, the best known contemporary method of meditation is that which involves a mantra, a word or phrase that is repeated over and over for a designated period of time. One concentrates on the mantra to the exclusion of all else, thus clearing the mind of all extraneous thoughts and divorcing it from the normal stream of consciousness. In this method, the mantra may be repeated verbally, or the repetition may be completely mental. This type of meditation is found in the Kabbalah, especially among the earlier schools. In the Hekalat literature, for example, one begins his spiritual ascent by repeating a number of divine names 112 times. He goes on to say, mantra meditation is an example of structured, externally directed meditation. It is externally directed insofar as one concentrates on a word or phrase, rather than on the spontaneous thoughts that flood the mind. Since it involves a specific practice repeated for a fixed length of time, it is considered a structured meditation. One example I can think of within the Jewish tradition of a mantra was a phrase that was repeated over and over again by Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, who is a Hasidic master. And he, in his practice, would repeat, and he encouraged his disciples to repeat the phrase, Ribono shel olam, 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 Ribono shel olam. And that phrase means master of the universe. And according to tradition, this phrase would lead him into a mystical state, an altered state of consciousness. Within Vajrayana, within Hindu tradition, and within Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and Buddhist tradition in general, mantras play a big part. One of the first mantras you'll learn within Tibetan Buddhism is Om Mani Padme Hum Hari. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. This is the mantra of Chenrezig, who is the Bodhisattva of Compassion. And it conveys that energy of compassion, loving kindness and compassion. And so these mantras, these words, they are supposedly able to invoke just a tremendous energy, tremendous power, and can alter our states of consciousness. And these are great tools to use for the psychonaut. These are great tools for any student of the mind. These are great tools for anyone who is interested in the exploration of consciousness. Yeah, I mean, that's what I care about more than anything else, and what is my biggest passion is I want to understand my mind, and I want to explore consciousness. I feel like the exploration of consciousness is one of the final frontiers, and one of the last things that mankind can explore, you know, in this reality. I mean, we've pretty much explored the planet. We haven't explored the oceans hardly at all, but we've definitely explored the shit out of this planet. But how many of us have truly explored the mind, plumbed the depth of the mind? I don't know. It's exciting. It's scary at times, you know. It's scary because I'm so attached to this idea of who I am, this idea of self, you know, self-attachment, Elijah, herbal mystic, this persona. And these practices, if done correctly, if you have your teacher that can guide you on the path, if you've met your guru, who is a genuine teacher who isn't concerned about taking your money, about keeping you as his student, but is genuinely wants to teach you to become your own guru, because ultimately that's the goal. But if you found your teacher that can guide you along these paths and teach you these meditative techniques from beginning to end in the proper way, through the proper methodology, then the sky is the limit as far as the exploration of consciousness goes. And then for most of us here in the West, you know, we don't have the time or the resources necessarily to find a teacher or to spend months in retreat practice doing meditative techniques or yogas that will help us to achieve these states. And so many of us, you know, I mean, we have turned to entheogens, we've turned to plant medicines, we've turned to other means to help us explore consciousness. And I come from the point of view that while those things can become distractions and can lead one into further delusion, further confusion, they also, on the other hand, can be great tools to liberate the mind and to explore consciousness. Which is why, you know, I've experimented with DMT, I've experimented with Changa, DMT in different forms. LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, but San Pedro, you know, because San Pedro, with all its alkaloids, besides mescaline, but just plants in general, because they do help. And I feel like they can help if somebody has the right intentions and the right motivations and the right set and setting. And they are powerful medicines, medicines for the mind, for mind exploration. I feel like, yeah, I feel like it's the last frontier, kind of that has been not really tapped, and explored, and that's consciousness. Running out of fluid for my torch. I don't know where I put it. Oh well. It's all good. See if I can make this happen. Anyway, so yeah, in the next few weeks I'm going to be making some videos more in depth on just some of the mystical and meditative traditions within the Kabbalistic schools from the 1st century till today. And then probably look at topics within Vajrayana Buddhism. But if there's any like mystical traditions that you guys feel like you'd like me to talk about or discuss, please let me know. I mean, I'm here for that. We can go look into any of these topics. I mean, yeah, there's so much we can look at. If you guys want to look at topics within the Christian contemplative tradition, we can go there. If you guys want to look at shamanistic traditions, plant medicine, we can go into that. If you guys want to look at more philosophy and the metaphysics of like Aristotle, if you guys want to look at Plato, we can get into that. Yeah, we can get in. There's a lot we can get into. This is an amazing book dealing with Shaivite Tantrism and Kashmir Shaivite Tantrism. It's a very profound book, written by Christopher D. Wallace. Check out his videos on YouTube. But yeah, let me know, guys. Let me know. You know what I mean? Like, we'll tackle different topics. So, yeah. Yeah, so it's been a few days since I've been on here doing anything. So I thought I would come on for a little bit. Still kind of getting used to this whole YouTube thing. And yeah, hopefully I can create content that is entertaining, beneficial, educational, for everyone. I'm not a master, I'm no teacher, I'm just an explorer of consciousness and a student. And my hope is to take you guys with me on this journey, I hope that that's what this channel is, just me being real, me being raw. I'm not going to plan too much. I don't really write anything down, I just kind of say things as they come and just flow, and hopefully that works. I don't want anything to be scripted. It just doesn't seem very genuine and real to me when things are scripted. Just my personal opinion and take. With that being said, I do hope to make like quality videos though, and like when I give information in those videos, like it's not gonna be scripted, but it's gonna be done in a legit way, you know, whatever that means. If you guys like the content of these videos, hit the like button, subscribe, and help me to continue to grow this channel. Those of you that are concerned that I'm dabbing on here, I live in California. We're a legal state, both medical and recreational. So those of you who are subscribed to my channel, like what are you guys interested in seeing? What are you interested in? Are you interested in more videos on entheogens, more trip reports? You guys interested in hearing more about different esoteric schools, mystical traditions? What are you guys interested in hearing? I'm going to be taking you guys on the road with me at the end of this month when I go to Arizona, go spend some time with my teacher, His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche. And yeah, that should be fun. It should be fun. How about you guys in the comment section? Do you guys use mantras in your practices and your meditation practices and your spirituality? Are mantras part of your lives? And if they are, have you guys noticed benefit in practicing mantra meditation? And what are some of the mantras that you use, if you are able to share? I want to hear a little bit more of what Rabbi Ari Kaplan has to say about some of the early schools of Jewish mysticism. Yeah? No? Alright. He said it's universally accepted by the Kabbalists that the first ones to engage in these meditative methods were the patriarchs and prophets, who used them to attain enlightenment and prophecy. Although there are many allusions to this in the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures, the Scripture is virtually silent when it comes to the providing explicit descriptions of their methods. Still, if one looks at the appropriate texts, one can gain considerable insight into the methods that were in use in the time of the prophets. The earliest direct statement regarding methods comes from the 1st century, from the early Talmudic period. Here we find some of the greatest Talmudists engaged in the mystical arts, making use of a number of meditative techniques to attain spiritual elevation and ascend to the transcendental realm. Many of these techniques consisted of the repetition of divine names, as well as intense concentration on the transcendental spheres. That's the Kabbalistic tree of life. And what little we do know of their methods is preserved in the few fragments, as well as in a remarkable complete text, the Hekolat Rabate, or the Greater Chambers. The most famous of that would be like the third book of Enoch, which is super like profound book. The main parts are presented for the first time in translation in this book. And it is during this period that some of the main classics of Kabbalah were written. These include the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of creation. This guy right here. The Bahir and the Zohar. It's the Bahir right here. These are really good translations by Rabbi Ari Kaplan and commentaries. And the Zohar, which I'm sure anyone in the occult or anyone that studied metaphysics or the mystical traditions have most likely heard of the Zohar. These involved even higher levels than those described in the Hechalat, and for the most part only the barest hints are provided as to how these levels were reached. And that's the unfortunate thing about Jewish mysticism, is a lot of these techniques were guarded and held closely within like circles of Kabbalists, and we have lost a lot of the literature due to the pogroms, the Spanish Inquisition. Yeah, unfortunately a lot has been lost, and then there's so much that has not been translated yet, so, and that still are in manuscript form. Yeah, so with the close of the Talmudic period, these methods became restricted to a very few small, close, secret societies. Both the Bahir and the Zohar remained completely unknown outside of these societies and were not revealed until the late 12th and 13th centuries, respectively. The publication of the Bahir, in particular, gave impetus to the study of the mysteries, and a number of individuals began to openly teach the secret methods and doctrines. So most remarkably among these was Rabbi Abraham Abulafia, 1240 to 1295. Having received the tradition from earlier sources, he was the first to actually put them in writing. For this he was condemned in many circles. Although most Kabbalists consider his methods to be authentic and based on a reliable tradition, several of his contemporaries, mostly Rabbi Isaac of Akko and Rabbi Yosef Gatalia, also speak of meditative methods. Most of their work, however, was eclipsed by the publication of the Zohar in the middle of the 1920s. So, yeah, when the Zohar came on the scene, basically, like Lurianic Kabbalah, Isaac Luria, the great Ari, a lot of his Kabbalah was based on the Zohar and his interpretation of the Zohar. So yeah, the Zohar and the Kabbalistic schools based off the Zohar basically eclipsed, and the schools that came before the Zohar and predated at least the publication of the Zohar, and some of the other schools of Kabbalah that dealt with more of the practical and meditative elements and not so much the philosophical, those began to fall more into the wayside. They become more obscure, less known. So most of the work, however, was eclipsed by the publication of Zohar in the middle of the 1290s. The great classic gripped the imagination of almost all the Kabbalists of the time, and the teachings of other schools was virtually forgotten. It is therefore no accident that many books written before this were never published, and among those which have not been lost, a good number exist only in manuscript, like I said earlier. So, unless you're fluent in Hebrew, unless you live in Israel, this is my opinion, and even inside Israel, I think it's very hard today to find authentic lineages of rabbis who come from lineages that can go back to the 1st century, to some of these earlier schools of Kabbalah. I don't know if they exist anymore, and it's really sad. It really breaks my heart, and as somebody who loves the Kabbalah and the Jewish mystical traditions, this is why. And I don't know if I discussed it in the DMT trip report, but I'll get into that. And the experience I had on DMT led me to go outside of Kabbalah and Jewish mystical traditions to look for something that could an authentic lineage that could at least go back long enough unbroken, that can convey, those methods of transformation that I was looking for. And I couldn't find that in anything, not even within Hinduism could I really say I found schools of Tantra or schools that, transformative schools or magical schools that could link themselves to a lineage that goes back more than a few hundred years, and same within Judaism. And I'm not saying that you can't find rabbis in Israel, but I'm sure the circles are very small and the knowledge is guarded. But I'm sure there are some rabbis still in Israel that can trace themselves back to these lineages. But most of us, men like me, and like majority of us out there, without a fluent knowledge of Hebrew, my Hebrew isn't good enough. I understand Hebrew to an extent, and I can read Hebrew to an extent. Not fluently enough to be able to study with any Kabbalistic masters in Israel, And that's just being honest and truthful. So with that being said, I did find my teacher finally, but it was within Vajrayana Tantric Buddhism, which is very universal, which is very non-dual, which goes beyond, within like Mahamudra and Dzogchen, goes beyond even Buddhism. Anyhow. So, unfortunately, the books like Zohar is more philosophical, and so it doesn't deal with the practical, the magical, or the meditative aspects of the Kabbalah, and those schools that did deal with those subjects. I think Rabbi Eric Kaplan even says that. Yeah. Since the Zohar has little to say about meditative methods, many important Kabbalists began to ignore the subject completely. They were too involved in trying to unravel the mysteries of this ancient book that had been concealed for many centuries. There were a few exceptions, however, and these Kabbalists made use of the methods of Abulafia, Gektalia, and Isaac of Akko. For over 200 years, however, we find virtually nobody exploring the Zohar itself to ascertain the meditative methods used by its authors. The main attempts in this direction occurred in the Safed school, which flourished during the 16th century. It reached its zenith in the teachings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, 1534 through 1572. Commonly known as the Ari, he showed how the various letter combinations found in the Zohar were actually meant to be used as meditative devices. Although the Ari wrote almost nothing himself, his teachings were arduously copied by his disciples and fill almost 24 large volumes. To a large extent, all this was an introduction to the methodology involved in his system of meditation. So, yeah. Just as the Zohar had overshadowed everything when it was published, so did the writings of the Ari overwhelm the other schools. 3 centuries later, his teachings were seen as the ultimate expression of the Kabbalah, and for the next 200 years, the greatest part of Kabbalah literature devoted itself to their interpretation. Although the Ari's meditative methods were used by a few individuals, and possibly by 1 or 2 minor schools, for the most part, the Kabbalists devoted themselves to theory rather than practice. Yeah. Anyhow, I'll get into more of this stuff and more in depth, and we'll take a look at some of the first century schools, which interest me a whole lot. I find the theory of Kabbalah deep and fascinating, and just a lot of it I can comprehend, but so much still is just over my head. The earlier schools of Kabbalah resonate a lot more with me because they were experiential. And as you're going to see, when I get into the Merkava mystics and talk about the Merkava mysticism, I feel like to an extent I can relate to them based off my experiences with dimethyltryptamine, with DMT. especially when used in the form of changa. And so I think I'll probably do a video on DMT changa and Merkava mysticism. Like, if that sounds interesting, if that sounds interesting to you guys, like, leave a comment down there and let me know. Let me know. Anyhow, I'm gonna get my day started. Thanks for stopping by, YouTubers. I love you. I wish you all a very blessed day. I wish you nothing but love, compassion, peace, and joy in your life. May all beings experience happiness and be freed from suffering. Om Mani Padme Hum Hri. 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 Om Mani Padme Hum Hri.